Awesome. Good. All right. Welcome in, everybody. This is the 50th episode of the Strength for Your Purpose podcast. You might be hearing or seeing something a little different depending on where you're taking this in this week. I crashed the Business of Happiness podcast studios. I took them over. I came in and took them over. Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy was gracious enough to invite me to record the 50th episode in her beautiful studio here. Thank you so much.
It's my honor. I'm so excited to be doing this.
Thank you so much. Well, you were the first person that popped into my mind as I was thinking of what I wanted to do for the 50th episode of the podcast, because as I stated the first time I had you on the podcast, this is kind of your fault. So this was something that you encouraged me to do after you had me on the Business of Happiness podcast. So thank you. And here we are 50 episodes later, and I'm excited to chat with you and use this beautiful setup that you have here.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you, Phil. I'm so grateful to you. And yeah, I remember that when you first interviewed me and we were talking about that. And it was so exciting because I knew you'd be so good at this. I knew you'd just be a natural. So, and I was so excited for you to also showcase what I think is one of your superpowers, which is creating relationships and really allowing other people to shine. So you're so good at it. Yeah. So I knew this would be a hit.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah. And that's that superpower, that what you encouraged me to do this for is something actually just before I got here and we started recording this, a really good friend of mine is getting back into running an office for a financial advisory group and asked me, what should I really be focusing on? And that's exactly what I told him was just build a bunch of relationships, like just go make really good sound relationships, because that's what's going to get you through a startup and maybe potentially some rough patches and rough times, having other people to lean on.
Yeah. And it's so cool how that superpower really surpasses technological advances and the digitization of business and industry right now. There really is no substitute for creating decent, good, authentic relationships.
Definitely. And it I've had it described to me before as really building a lot of roots, like a tree analogy, right? If we have more avenues, because certainly things like social media or doing a podcast or whatever the case might be are all different sort of funnels into growing something, whatever it is that you're growing. And it might not even be business, even if we're looking at it from you're trying to just start something new. Maybe it's an organization, a volunteer-based organization, whatever the case might be. I think if we have more of those, more avenues of support, whatever that support looks like for the goal that you're trying to achieve, if a storm blows through, the stronger that root system, the more likely you're going to be able to survive that storm.
I love it.
That's blowing through.
Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy, because it does allow you to even dig in deeper into your roots when that does happen, kind of reach for those networking and relationships that you've created so that you know that you can find that strength and resource there. And what's really interesting as well, that I've kind of, as you know, I've been on this journey of discovering what happiness means.
Yes.
And what happiness means to everybody individually. And what's been a common theme is this idea of relationships in terms of happiness,
right?
That, none of us are really an island, and that even though we can find so much joy and appreciation from different aspects of life, it's so much sweeter when you can share it with someone.
Yes. Yeah. Sharing it with someone, sharing the successes, but also maybe the not so great things, and having that sounding board available when you need the help or the support in those tough times, and people to lean on in the good and the bad. For sure. That's gonna drive happiness. I think the other thing, and this was another thing I was kind of thinking about that we could have as part of our conversation today, was the actual purpose part of the Strength for Your Purpose podcast. Because we've talked a lot about, again, the mental, emotional, and physical aspects that go into strength, but the purpose part is really important as well, because if we don't have a true drive for whatever it is that we're trying to do, some of those other things aren't going to matter as much. And that's a huge driver of happiness as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, that brings up a good question that I have for you. And I don't mean to be turning the tables here.
No.
That's what happens when you get two people who are good at interviewing, right? In the same room.
We'll just interview each other.
There you go. But have you found through this journey with the Strength of Purpose podcast, knowing that this is your 50th episode, have you found that your purpose has changed, or have you come more in alignment with what the true purpose is? Have you kind of narrowed in on what that is for you?
Yeah, I think it has two of the major parts. The two major reasons to start the podcast in general was, number one, to just get good information out to people from experts in those respective fields, whatever those fields might be, that are going to speak to the mental, emotional, and physical aspects of strength, but also to give a platform to those experts, right? And give them a way to get their in more of a long form version, to get their message out there to people. So finding people that I think need to be heard more, and to get in front of more people. So I think that if anything has shifted, it's been more to that, which was a reason to start the podcast in the first place, because within the message that those people give, those other aspects are going to be there. Those other aspects of like health and wellness and whatever that looks like is going to be there, but trying to give other people that I just have a lot of respect for in different ways and think need to be heard and have something that they're putting out there into the world that is going to benefit and help other people. I think I've really veered a little more toward that being the purpose behind Strength for Your Purpose podcast.
Yeah, that's really cool. I honor you for that, because I think that has come through, at least as a listener of your podcast, as a raving fan of the Strength for Purpose podcast. I do get that, from every episode, both of those aspects of it. Do you find that you need to remind yourself of the achievement of it to feel great about it, like the celebration of it? Like sometimes we get so focused on what the purpose is, we forget to look back and see that we're actually achieving it. Like we put that goal out there and then we don't even realize when we reach it, because we're so ready to push the goalpost to the next thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I usually feel that way at the end of recording an episode. I think that's when I notice it the most, because we've just had a good conversation. I've probably learned more about the person, because most of the people I interview, give or take a few here and there, I've already had a relationship with somehow, and have learned about what they do, what they have to provide, and the value that they give people. But in those conversations, more always comes out that you didn't know before. And again, the primary goal now shifting toward trying to give those people a platform to get their message out to more people, to help more people, just by recording the episode has been achieved. And obviously, hopefully we get a bunch of people, listening to it, and maybe even more people taking advantage of what those people have to offer to help them, which is all kind of a bonus. But at the end of the episode going, oh, I think we really accomplished what we're trying to accomplish here. And I got to learn more about them. They maybe got to learn a little bit more about me. And what came out of that was their message is now out there in a way that maybe it hasn't been before, or is in front of people it hasn't been in front of before, or whatever the case might be. So yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. I think that's unique, because I think many people don't take the time to reflect on what they actually have accomplished and achieved.
Yeah. We're especially when we start something new that we haven't really done a lot of before. I think our mind, and I know mine does, because I'm just kind of a, what's the next, very always looking at what the next thing is, like what needs to be done next to achieve the goal. But looking back can kind of fuel the fire to the hard work that you need to put in to achieve the goal. So
absolutely,
that's important.
Yeah.
That's real important.
Yeah, I agree. It can be very powerful.
Yeah. So what if, same question. Just gonna,
I love it.
flip the script for the business of happiness, for, for your podcast, and for the venture you're kind of setting out on to try to help more people find happiness in their life, in their business, whatever the case might be, find that definition of happiness. How have you celebrated that along the way?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I asked the question because I know I need to do more of that.
Yeah.
I think similarly, we both are very high achieving, and we look to others who are doing such wonderful work as inspiration. And so sometimes we can fall prey to comparison and self-judgment. And I think that not getting in our own way is always a challenge, because I think we put such high expectations on ourselves and really want to be further along in the process than we really are.
Always. Yeah.
And in reflection, we often get insight that sometimes we realize that we couldn't have possibly been further along in the process than we were at the time. So, hindsight is 2020, and we can look back and say, okay, I really needed to learn that lesson before I was able to take the next leap in the business.
Right.
So I think I've just been incorporating in my practice a little bit more appreciation for where I am, which is a challenge.
Yeah.
But I think also noticing the trajectory and having faith that it'll continue. That's a big one, that there's a fear, I think, in entrepreneurs and in early business owners that I've kind of reached as well as I can do, the best I can be, and now it's just going to level off here. Right. And so there's a certain amount of faith that you have to have that you'll continue that 1% growth, that the intention has gotten you this far, and that you'll continue that trajectory into the future. Yeah. And part of it is returning to that purpose, as you said, is returning to why am I doing this anyway? Right.
Yeah, that's going to always steer you toward what's the next effort you need to put in. Yeah. Where's the next step, and having the faith, I think personally, allows you to look back on what got you to that point. Like that's having that faith of, okay, things are kind of leveling out right now. Maybe this week or this month, whatever the case might be, I'm not seeing the trajectory I'd love to be seeing, or that I've seen in the recent months, or whatever the case might be. So having that faith of, well, I've gotten to this point and I know kind of where I am. I know where I ultimately want to be. What's the next step to get me there? To me, that lends itself highly to some reflection at that point, and looking back, like you just said, which can be so powerful because it usually gives you insights to what did I do to get here? Yeah. And that's going to bring you to your next steps in a lot of cases.
In your reflection that you've done, is there anything that you've learned that surprised you?
That's good. That's a good question. I think the big thing that comes to mind is the fact that, and it seems so simple, when you first get started, there are a lot of people that tell you that if you just don't give up, like you keep putting that one step in front of the other, you're going to make it happen. Like, unless you stop trying completely, that it'll happen. I think that's kind of that is a little surprising, because it seems like there are certain points when you're like first getting going, or you hit some of those first major roadblocks where you're like, how the heck did I, in that moment, I know that I was so stressed, not, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to get past this? Especially being a new business owner in the midst of a pandemic, like the first time you have to cross some of those hurdles, none of us have had to do that before. So I think that is probably one of the truest things I've been told since starting my business, that unless you fully give up, there's always going to be a way to get past it. You just have to do that and put that work in, keep driving towards your goals and your purpose, and you'll get there. People are right.
Yeah. Just that compounding interest of just showing up. Yeah.
Yeah. Showing up and just being consistent, being consistent with that showing up, which doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah. You just have to be putting putting the time, effort, and making sure that you care enough about it to do those things consistently. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And it's, but you also have to have you have to make sure if anyone's listening to this going, I'm not sure I've seen that. You got to kind of wonder are you doing the thing that you're really supposed to be doing? Are you getting pulled in different directions? Or are you operating more on doubt and fear versus the like you said, faith and what you're trying to achieve?
That's really interesting that you say that, because as I was asking you the question, I thought you were going to flip it back on.
Yeah.
And so I was preparing already.
Right.
And what I was going to say, for me, something that's been very surprising has been the impact honesty has on business.
Yeah.
And you just touched on it, honesty with yourself being one enormous component of it. And so I think, that honest reflection, once again, we're talking about reflection, but having an honest conversation with yourself, not just in terms of how you've been doing, what you've been doing, but also on whether or not this is still fueling you and lighting up your spirit. Because that's the one thing I've noticed is, in terms of happiness or motivation, if it doesn't light you up, you're going to keep looking for these extrinsic sources of motivation, keep asking, how do I stay motivated? How do I keep persevering? And it really is most impactful when you can have that intrinsic source of motivation, which comes from honest evaluation of what matters to you.
Right.
And once again, we're back to the purpose discussion.
Right.
If your purpose isn't speaking to you, if it isn't completely aligned with your core values, it's going to feel forced.
Definitely. Yeah. It's gonna feel forced. People are gonna see that people are gonna feel that the people you interact with, whether it's, coworkers, employees, clients, whatever the case might be. And that's gonna negatively impact things. I think it's also easy sometimes to make concessions on your purpose a little bit, or it could be, if we allow that to happen. Because I even have those thoughts myself, especially if what you're trying to do is something that's different.
Yeah.
Something that 80, 90, 99% of people in what you're trying to do don't do it that way, or don't align that way. It's an uphill battle, but it's one worth fighting if the alternative is something that just a little piece of you dreads. Like, you weigh out the pros and cons and you're like, I hate the cons more than I love the pros of the other way to do it. And I love all the pros more than I hate the cons of the way that I am doing it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's that pain punishment principle, right? Like, is getting up out of bed and going for a run, is the pain of getting up out of bed more, or can I give the promise of how great I'm going to feel on that run greater weight than the pain of getting up out of bed? Yeah, the same kind of thing.
Exactly.
And it's so interesting. I know, Bria, how old is your daughter now?
2.5.
2.5.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't believe she's getting so big.
I know.
But, children teach us this so beautifully, because they don't yet know how to do anything other than what brings them so much joy in the moment.
Right.
They know how to just fully immerse themselves in the happiness of the moment. And they haven't yet learned how to put other people's comfort first, you know, and then we teach them how. We ruin them.
Right. Exactly.
We tell them to share. We tell them we force them to hug grandma when they don't want to hug her.
Right.
But really, kids are so good at just understanding what they want and what they need.
Right.
And it's almost like, I don't know if you've noticed this in business, but we almost have to untrain ourselves from some of those things that we thought were the appropriate way to be, or the appropriate thing to do in business.
Yeah.
And dig back into what really matters to us.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's true. Especially, my mind, when you say that, immediately goes to the work that you and I both do in our primary businesses in healthcare. The whole point of healthcare is to be selfless, right? And put those people and their needs first. But we in turn have to take care of ourselves to be able to provide that care. But we also have to be providing the care in a way that we align with, or the care is probably not going to be as good. So I'm sure you've seen this in your field, and I've seen it and worked in it in mine. Those places that put more emphasis on the business and the numbers of the business, not the results of the care, or invest in the happiness and well-being of the employees, tends to be a lot of turnover, a lot of people, not many people returning back as repeat clients or patients to that business. A lot of fluctuations in places that you wouldn't expect to see fluctuations. And from an outside perspective, as a patient, you might not pick up on that because the interaction with the one or two people you interact with at that business are great, but the inner workings are like a horror film, or could be. So I think that's a tough kind of a balancing act sometimes in healthcare, because we still have to be operational as a business, especially we have a team that we need to take care of and things like that. But being okay with, we have to be happy first and foremost, and be in line with our purpose and all those other things that we mentioned so far, or the rest of it's not going to be as good.
Absolutely. And expecting things outside of yourself to bring you happiness is the big mistake.
Sure.
So if you're expecting to find other people to be responsible for your happiness instead of owning your happiness first.
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from the many people I've interviewed, is that finding that fulfillment. So kind of taking your example in healthcare, focusing on the purpose is to serve. The purpose is to help your clients feel better. And if they're giving you negative feedback, you can't allow that to impact your purpose.
Right.
So just because they're having a terrible day, just because they have poor coping skills, doesn't mean you're not still delivering on your purpose.
Right.
And so I think that's a big problem in healthcare, is that we're looking so much for feedback from our patients and our clients that sometimes we rely on that as an indicator of our success, or an indicator of our ability to achieve our goals, because it really is a service-based industry. So I want you to tell me I'm doing a good job. I'm trying to make you feel better. And that can be tricky. So I think it's even more important in healthcare that we own our own responsibility for our own happiness, and that you can leave work at the end of the day feeling fulfilled, not dependent on other people making you feel that way.
For sure. I think the other place my mind goes when you say that is people in healthcare are, I think that maybe affects them a little bit more, like that feedback from those people, because they're there for those people. It's not like other service industries where the service you're providing them doesn't necessarily impact a huge aspect of their life on a day-to-day basis, but we're working on their body, the only one that they have. Like, even if you talk about like the example we brought up about the financial advisor, sure, people's income and ability to save money for retirement, like that's a huge impact on their life. But money is one of those things that's always going to come and go. There's always different ways you can look. That could be a whole other podcast, Tarryn. we could dive into that, take a whole other episode and dive into that. But dollars and cents are going to come and go, but you've only got one of your body. So I think just the people in healthcare rely so heavily on that customer feedback, let's say, more than in a lot of other service industries, because we have a huge effect on this person's entire livelihood, their ability to make money, their ability to be with their family and have fun with their family and do the things they enjoy and get fulfillment and happiness out of in life. We're affecting that one way or another. So that feedback, I'm sure you've experienced this. We tend to hang our hats sometimes a little bit too much on the, just throwing a number out there, 5 people who maybe didn't get to the point where all of us were hoping they would, versus the, who knows, dozens, hundreds, thousands, whatever, that got exactly what they were hoping for and then some. And it's just the personalities, I think, of the people that tend to run healthcare or work in healthcare and run businesses in healthcare.
But it's a great point, because I think that's where the honesty comes back again. If you're going to be honest about acknowledging those treatments that didn't go exactly as planned, or you didn't get the outcome you were hoping for in a human living body, right? Miraculously, you can control nature.
Right.
But if we focus so much on those, we have to, with all honesty, take accountability for all the good we have done.
Yes.
That's not being honest with yourself if you're only focusing on the negative aspects. And in fact, being honest with yourself in order for continued growth and focusing on your purpose means you actually have to focus even more on the good. We have such a tendency in our culture, like you said, to focus on the problems. And even in healthcare, that's how we're trained.
Right.
You find a problem as a diagnosis and you base your entire treatment plan on that. Same in dentistry. And so we hone in on the negatives and we become so practiced and efficient at it that we lose sight of the focusing on the bigger picture and on the things that are going right.
Right.
I remember there's this talk that Tony Robbins, I've mentioned this so many times on my podcast. It was just so impactful in my mind. He was telling the story of going to learn how to race cars. And he was driving this, I don't know, I'm butchering the story. I'm sorry, Phil.
Okay.
He was driving around this racetrack doing some death-defying things on a fast car.
Sure.
And the coach who was teaching him how said, what we're now going to do is go straight towards a wall. And we're heading at some terribly fast rate towards this wall. And you're not going to look at the wall. You're going to look at where you want to go. Because if you're looking at the wall, you're going to hit the wall.
Yeah.
You have to look at where you want to go so that you turn that wheel. And they were doing these spins and loops, and they started to head for the wall at some terrible speed. And all of a sudden, the coach took his face and turned it, because he realized he was staring at the wall.
Yeah.
And the importance of turning your attention to where you want to go, and we always want to look at the problems, fix the problems, get better at it, undo all those, which I think there's great value in reflection and in cleaning up, your past actions. Where did I go wrong? How can I do better?
Yeah.
But there's so much value in looking towards the positive as well. And once again, pulling out that focus of your purpose and reminding yourself why you're doing this to begin with.
Yeah. I think the other two things pop into my mind when you share that story. One is sometimes we need help to do that.
Yes.
So some sort of coaching, mentorship,
turning your head towards the positive.
Don't look at the wall because you're going to hit the wall. Look at maybe even look back where you came from and where you want to go, and look at where you're at, and all those types of reflection that we've touched on a little bit today. But the other thing that pops into my mind is experience definitely matters with that too, right? Because the coach knew to not look at the wall and to turn that person's head and look where they wanted to drive. And I think back, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, when I was first starting out as a PT versus where I am now, you worry a lot more about people that come in and maybe give like a negative report from the last treatment or something like that. But now I know to like ask more questions, talk to them more, get more out of them, because those people, just like us sitting here right now, probably tend to focus more on the negative too, and not maybe like the fact that, well, it's bothering me the same amount, but I did more. Right. I was able to do a little more than I did before it hurt me, things like that. So finding those things and helping people see those things, because anyone going through something challenging or new needs to realize that it's a process and it's not a linear one. And just being able to ask questions to make that apparent to not only the person you're trying to help, but sometimes we need that.
Yeah, just a new perspective.
too. Like, I wonder why that is.
Yeah.
Let's dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which gives us more information that's helpful to help that person. But it also allows us to realize like the sky's not falling. What you're doing is working. Maybe there's just some adjustments that need to be made, or what, we need to turn your head. We need to not look at the wall. We need to look at where we're going.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
It's amazing how sometimes emotion can get you just so narrow-minded.
Yes.
And even when you're in it, it's so hard to see beyond what you just believe so intensely to be true.
Yeah.
But yes, having an outside perspective can really help question that. What is actually true in this situation?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's something that all of us have a very, very, I think if anyone can actually do that on their own, I would love to talk. If you can do that on your own, please come and be on my podcast and talk to me, because even the people that are the most successful, like I am sure people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos sit there sometimes and dwell on that negative. Like they have probably nothing in the world to worry about, or we think they don't.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they do it too. So if anyone out there goes, oh yeah, I can always in the moment reflect back and flip that switch, I want to talk to you because
well, I'll tell you, I've recently
nature.
learned a really good technique.
Mhm.
Just a little tip.
Yeah.
That's still struggle for me to do, but I love this. I love this technique. So if somebody's listening, let us know if you've tried this.
Yeah.
But it actually came from the works of Byron Katie. And so she says, when you're in that moment of suffering, so let's call suffering beating yourself up, just not feeling good, right? Yeah. In that moment of suffering, you're telling yourself a story like, she's not getting better. I'm a terrible dentist, whatever the story is.
Sure.
Ask yourself, is it true? And then the follow-up question to that is, can I absolutely know it to be true? And then sometimes we don't know that to be true. We assume so much about someone. Sure. So she just told me I ruined her life. Do I actually know that to be true? Or is she just having a terrible day? Is it possible? And then that's the other question is it possible the exact opposite is true? Like, how could we know that that's not true? How could we know? And very easily we can see a completely different scenario. She just had a terrible day. She's going through a divorce. She's just finding someone to take it out on,
Sure.
Could the exact opposite be true? And the truth is, reality probably falls somewhere in between those two.
Right. Yeah.
There's a myriad of options between those two stories that we have.
Right.
And then when I do that exercise, it takes a little bit of the sting out of it. Yeah. Oh, I actually don't know what is true for her.
Right.
And then I can just return back to, well, what would I do if I knew the exact opposite was true? In fact, what if I've actually made the best impact on her life possible? She said, I ruined her life. What if I actually saved her life? What would I do next?
Right.
And then that brings us back to our purpose. Oh, I'd keep doing what I'm doing.
Right.
That tucks you right back in again.
Yeah.
But, oh, yeah. If I've actually shown her the truth about herself, maybe I've actually led her on a new path. Maybe she doesn't give me credit for it.
Right.
But maybe I've actually given her insight into a new path, and I've actually done the very best thing for her.
Sure. Yeah. Because sometimes in that situation, whatever's going on isn't the best thing for them. Yeah. And realizing that, I think that's a great tip. I definitely need to start practicing that form of storytelling or self-talk, because I think for anyone out there that would call themselves an overthinker, that practice right there immediately debunks all the scary stuff you're saying to yourself in your head at that moment, and flips that script a little bit from overthinking to, those are all what ifs.
All what ifs.
Those are all what ifs, and the what ifs on the opposite side of that could be 100% true.
And the interesting thing is when you go to the end of that and you say, well, if the opposite was true, what would my next actions be? And you go back to your purpose, you realize your purpose was to help, not to be the hero.
Very, very important distinction.
Right? Because if your purpose in healthcare is I want to help people, it's not I want to be the savior of people and I want them to recognize me. So maybe you've helped in a more impactful way that's broader than what you thought you actually could.
Sure.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think some of that kind of brings my mind back to the whole idea of experience too. Not just in healthcare, literally in any venture you might be trying to start out, whether it's in healthcare, in business, a combination of the two, a new health journey, whatever the case might be. If you've never been there before, it's much easier for you to go to those more negative places and that overthinking a little faster, versus maybe you haven't seen that exact thing before, but you've seen things like it before.
Yeah.
And when you start down that path of sort of talking yourself out of the negative, it brings you back to that place a little bit better. Because when we all first start out, we all want to be the hero. We're going to go save the world with whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's our own world or other people's worlds or the whole world itself. But we soon realized that that's impossible. We can't.
Well, there are much easier ways to be a hero.
Right.
You could go and wait for someone to, have a car accident. You could save them, and then you could be the hero. There are much quicker ways to be heroes if that's your incentive, if that's your purpose.
Sure.
But I think, none of us went into healthcare to be heroes, or very few of us did.
Right.
We went in because we want to help.
Right.
And those are two very different things.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great perspective. And I think, those lines are easy to get blurred, but which is surprising because, as you said, they are two very different things.
Yeah. And there comes in that whole happiness question again, is if you're looking for outside validation, you're looking to be the hero.
Right.
Where if you can acknowledge and reflect and say, wow, I've made a big difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
Well, that was my intention.
Right.
And I didn't intend to be perfect at it.
Right.
And be 100% the hero with every single person.
Right.
The intent was just to help people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a good realization to have about ourselves, because there are definitely people, and we keep using the healthcare example, but I think I think it's a good example, but anyone who is setting out to provide a service for other people in a very selfless manner. I think this is true of a lot of those types of people, is they tend to put more stake in what people think about what they're doing. And some of that's personality. Like, you don't have to be in healthcare to have that personality. There are people in the corporate ladder system,
True.
In the business world, who hang their hat on and their value on what everyone else around them thinks of them, both their performance at work, their personality, their looks, whatever the case might be. They hang their hat on others' opinions of that, and that's a huge killer of happiness, and a huge killer of a drive toward any purpose.
And it's so easy to do in this age of social media and feedback that we're looking for constantly on, Yelp or all those platforms.
Sure.
It's hard not to get wrapped up into it.
Well, that stuff has really driven the overthinking, I believe, too, because people have been overthinking things for decades, but it's very easy to think that all of a sudden someone's ignoring you, or they don't value what you have to say simply because they didn't respond to that message immediately, or it's very easy for your brain to spiral into those negative thoughts in today's digital world, because we all just think we're all sitting on our phones, because that's sort of the perception we have, but in reality, that's really not what all of us do all of the time. So it's definitely fed into some more of the negative aspects of that thought process.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. But the moral of the story is, I think the purpose and what drives you and what lights you up inside is the way out of that.
Yeah, I think so too. And then, wrapping back up to what we started talking about, relationships, like you said, when it's hard to do on your own, when you're so embedded in the emotions of it, reaching out into those relationships of other people who've been in the same boat, or who can commiserate and understand, but also choosing those relationships wisely, because they're definitely, misery loves company. So it's easy to get into a relationship where we just sit and complain all the time to one another and support one another in the negatives and keep heading towards that wall.
Yeah.
But finding those relationships that really empower you and light you up and help you to live your very best life and be your very best self.
Yeah. And being okay with letting the relationships that don't do that go.
Oh, that's a hard one.
Not putting the effort. It's way harder in our personal life for sure than it is in business or whatever the case might be. But yeah, if it's not helping you, don't keep putting the time and effort in saying, well, it would be good if they did help me. Yeah. Because that's just going to get you a whole lot a whole lot of nowhere. I recently had a client of mine actually tell me that, especially in a business sense, people that you're working with, or maybe that you just hired or something like that, are probably going to show you who they are and what things are going to look like in a 2-week period. It's just been this person's experience. That might not be true for everybody, because people can change, but we don't want to get stuck in that. Well, maybe they'll change. Maybe I can help fix that situation. Because if things keep happening, if you hear hooves, think horse, not zebra, right? That old saying. So yeah, this person told me that people are going to show you who they are and kind of who they're going to be within that role, whatever role they're playing in your life, within probably about a 2-week period. So it's still very easy to fall in that trap of it'll change, or it can get better, or I can help change this behavior.
I can be the hero.
I can be the hero, right? Exactly. But remembering that, okay, this is the third time this has come up, and geez, that thing came up within the first 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks or whatever of me building this relationship with this person. Maybe I already knew this.
It's really interesting. It's so funny you're talking about this. I was thinking about this recently, because another arena that we tend to suffer in personally is when those relationships are impacting us negatively. And we just can't change the other person. So we thought we could, or we thought maybe with our honesty, I've been asking you to do this, please do this differently, please. And then, especially in personal relationships, remembering whether or not the relationship is worth more than that incident. So is the relationship still valuable for you if that person never changed? If they would keep doing that same thing. And I know this comes up around the holidays with mothers-in-law.
Oh, yeah.
Not just mothers-in-law. I'm sure sisters-in-law and sisters and all the things.
Right.
Generally women. No, just kidding.
Right, yeah.
But, sometimes that's a challenge, and sometimes being able to let go and realize, well, what if this person never changes? Can I still love them for who they are? Is this relationship still valid for me? Instead of constantly trying to change the other person, which we really have no ability to do.
Right. Yeah. Pretty much never.
Yeah. Never.
I think that's, you're kind of goes back to the lead the horse to water, right?
Yeah.
You can't make them drink. That's that person. That's probably who they are. That's what their their values and whatnot are obviously not lining up with yours, and that their willpower is not going to, you're not going to change that.
No,
you're not going to influence that. We'd all like to think we can.
Yeah.
But especially when when we think it's to help them.
Well, this is coming right back as well to healthcare, because especially in physical therapy,
sure,
believe it or not, in orthodontics, most certainly, we're just the guides.
Right.
But really, it takes a lot of motivation and a lot of accountability for their own actions once they leave the room, once they leave our office.
Yep.
And so we take a lot of ownership and responsibility for that, which really is not ours.
Right.
So what if that patient who's not following through with those actions at home, who's not showing any progress, what if we just accept that we're not going to be able to change them and it doesn't affect our purpose?
Yes.
What if we can get to that place?
Yeah.
Where we could come back to recognizing the value of our purpose despite that difficulty and not an inability to change the other person. Because I think that's another big challenge in healthcare, is it does require so much responsibility on both ends of the relationship.
For sure. Yeah. And that, that we could do another podcast on that.
I know. we get deep fast.
We could do a whole nother podcast on that. But I think some of that has to do with the environment, the healthcare system that we're in, being a little more reactive. But yes, we still need to be aware that it's a two-way, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
Especially in healthcare, it definitely needs to be more of a partnership with that person that you're working with.
Absolutely.
And much less of and that's actually kind of why I doing what I'm doing. The people I work with, I call them clients, not patience, because I feel like sometimes patience means I'm just taking care of you, but client means like I'm someone that you're working with, or I'm working with you, not simply just taking care of you. I'm taking care of you, but it's got to be an active participation, and not as much of a passive one.
Yeah, and that's enormously respectful too.
Yeah, it's going to be. I personally feel like getting to that place sooner and having some of those conversations with people sooner, which is hard to do.
Oh, it's so hard, especially when they haven't been receiving that kind of care before.
Right. It's hard to have those conversations, but the sooner you have it with them, you're actually helping them more.
Absolutely.
Even another great example, something we've already kind of talked about, even if it means they wind up not working with you, maybe they're going to be a better fit for somebody else who does what you do, but does it in a different way. Maybe that's going to be better for them. And that's okay, because you didn't waste their time. They didn't waste yours potentially, because if you're not going to get fulfillment out of working with them, again, taking you away from your purpose, it's not going to be good for anybody involved. And none of us would like to say this, but we all have to ask ourselves, if I'm not happy about being around this person, is my care going to be as good versus the person I more enjoy being around and helping, who's going to see things the way that in the same way, that with that message you're putting out there, that purpose that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
So, and we don't like to ask ourselves that in healthcare, but
I know,
but we have to.
It's that honesty piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Tarryn, this has been fantastic. I love our conversations.
I do too.
Whether they're recorded or not.
Well, once again, I'm honored and I'm so happy for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
On 50. It's a big deal.
Thank you very much. Yeah, 50 episodes. It flew by.
Yeah.
It seems just yesterday I was figuring out how to upload one, let alone record and upload and put out 50 of them. So thank you very much again for not only letting me crash your gorgeous,
I love it.
Your gorgeous space here,
anytime,
but also for the nudge and the inspiration to go out and do this, because I have found a lot of joy and fulfillment in it, and I think it really does serve part of my purpose with my mobile physical therapy practice, as well as just the things that my purpose in life, which goes beyond that physical therapy practice. So thank you for helping me get to that point, and thank you for all your support. And we will definitely have to do this again. Yeah,
I'd be honored. Thank you. I honor you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for listening. It's been the 50th episode of the Strength for Your Purpose podcast. I have some more great interviews coming up this month that are going to help you all maximize that mental, emotional, and physical strength to fulfill your true purpose in life. So thanks everybody. Go make it a great week. Yay. And cut.